Since the beginning of 2009, the United States Department of Justice has recovered more than $5 billion in taxpayers' money that were lost due to fraud committed by corporations and individuals against the government. According to the agency, most of the cases that resulted in a recovery were brought by whistleblowers, people who jeopardized their own career and reputation to expose fraud within their company or industry. I am here today with Milberg attorney Kirk Chapman to discuss the False Claims Act, the federal law that prohibits fraud against the government. In addition, the False Claims Act also has provisions that protect and reward whistleblowers to encourage them to report cases of fraud. Kirk has successfully represented numerous whistleblowers in the past and has decades of experience handling lawsuits by whistleblowers. Hello, Kirk. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Can you please tell us what the False Claims Act is?
The False Claims Act is a federal statute that applies to the federal government, and it allows the federal government to go after people or companies who have defrauded the government. Individuals who may have, or entities that may have, caused the government to pay too much for some sort of contract, to double bill the government, or to defraud them in the terms of sort of contract that the government, that they have entered into with the government.
Sure.
And that statute provides that the government can go after them, can recover the money, but it also provides for treble damages and also can provide for penalties for each violation of the act. And it also has a unique provision, and that provision is called the qui tam provision, or the qui tam process. And that's a process by which not just the government on its own could go after somebody who has defrauded the government, but it can actually allow for an individual, a person who they'll call a whistleblower or a relator. And that person can come forward and bring a lawsuit themselves to the government's attention, and that allows for a lot more information to come to the government so they can bring a lot more lawsuits. It's a unique provision of this statute.
Sure. Now, can anyone be a whistleblower?
Yes. Actually, anybody can be a whistleblower unless they work for the government. If they have information that is inside information. And by that I mean it needs to be information that is specific to the fraud that has taken place, and it has to be something that is not known to the public. It can't be publicly disclosed. But as long as you have this knowledge and you bring it to the government, you could be a whistleblower.
Sure. Now, what kind of protections and incentives for whistleblowers are granted by the law?
Well, there are two major protections under the law. The first is that everything is done confidentially in the beginning, and everything is done under seal. So if a whistleblower comes forward and they want to proceed, give the information to the government, file a lawsuit, that's how it's done. It's all done under seal, meaning that when it's filed, the government is the only one who knows about it. The other side doesn't know about it. Not even the courts know about it in the beginning. That gives the government time to investigate and protects the whistleblower during that time. The second big protection is what they call the Section H of the statute. And that's a specific employment anti-retaliation provision. Like a typical employment statute, it provides protection to the person who wants to come forward or does come forward with a claim or a possible claim, and the employer takes some sort of retaliatory action against them, firing them being the worst, of course, then it provides penalties for that as well, and a chance for the whistleblower to be compensated for that.
Sure. Okay, now, can you please name some types of fraud currently being committed against the federal government?
Well, there's all different kinds of fraud, and there's all different kinds of fraud that would fall under the rubric here of the False Claims Act and the statute itself. Like I said, the government paying too much for something is essentially it. Knowingly paying too much. The classic example in when the statute was first enacted was for Department of Defense fraud. So for example, when somebody, an entity contracts to build a submarine and it doesn't do it to the proper specifications, or it builds much more than they said it was going to cost, classic frauds like that. But nowadays, probably the largest expenditure that the government has is for healthcare, such as Medicare, for the elderly, Medicaid, for people who can't afford health insurance themselves. In those instances, there's a lot of fraud that goes on right now, and it's probably the biggest area where people know of certain types of frauds and can come forward and be a whistleblower.
Sure. Now, if someone is aware of fraud against the government, what can they do to go forward with a suit?
Well, first of all, the way that the statute has been interpreted by the courts is that they are not allowed to proceed pro se on their own. So they would need to contact an attorney, somebody who's experienced in it, and there are lots of sources of information out there that can lead somebody to a good, what we call a quitam, or an FCA lawyer, somebody experienced in this field. And they can give you advice right away on this. They will proceed with you by very confidentially. They would want to gather all the information together, and the steps are to contact the government as soon as possible. So I would say that for a person who has this information out there, the first thing to do is to keep it confidential to themselves, reach out to an attorney, and that attorney can give them advice on how best to protect themselves at their job if they still work there, or to proceed as a whistleblower if they want to proceed in that fashion.
Sure. Well, thank you for your time. It's been very insightful.
Thank you very much.
And for more information on whistleblower lawsuits, please visit our website at classactioncentral.com.